So now I want to turn to a ghost story for this Halloween Sense and Signal episode. So I was told this story over this past week when I went on a trip down to a town in southern Washington. I'm not going to name the town because I don't want to bring them any negative attention. It's Kelso. And so I went down to southern Washington for this conference, and it was a good trip for the most part. I took the train down, which that plays a key part in this ghost story is that train. And one thing I want to talk about before I get to the train is Red Lobster restaurant. And you're not going to see the connection here right away, but you will eventually. So I go to my hotel, I'm waiting for the conference, and I need to get some dinner. And normally I would go to a local restaurant, get some local food, local cuisine, really understand the culture of the place that I'm staying in and get to know the town. But I was tired. There was a Red Lobster right next door. I said, okay, I'll go there. And I've been to Red Lobster maybe 2 times before in my life. Don't have memorable experiences of either time. My wife has a good memory of one instance years ago, but she was pregnant when we went, and so she was really hungry. So maybe that's informing her memory of that first Red Lobster experience. But the last 2 times I've gone, it hasn't been very good, and this time was totally true. So I go in, I order some fish and chips and some clam chowder. I'm eating it, and it's kind of mediocre food at best. And the waitress serving me, it's clear that she's been told to upsell everybody. I can hear the other waiters and waitresses upselling people all over the place, and I'm not doing it, right? I'm just having my simple fish and chips and chowder and a beer. And I'm sure she's not angry, but disappointed in my unambitious ordering preferences. And, she showed it. It was very clear to me that she was disappointed in having me as a customer. So that was a bad dining experience, and it was a lesson learned that just go to a local place. Don't go to a chain place when you go to a new town for a conference or something like that. Find something authentic and local. And I ended up doing that later in the trip, and that's where I picked up the ghost story. So after my conference, I go to the train station, the Amtrak train station, and I walk in, and they tell me the train's gonna be a couple hours late, and I knew that from my phone. They alerted me on my phone like they do these days, and I just wanted to double check. And at this point, I was disappointed, but at the same time, post-COVID, like many people, I just go, it is what it is. So I let it go. I knew there was a pub down the street I had seen, so I was like, I'm just gonna go there, have a sandwich and a beer, and enjoy myself. And make the best of this situation. So I go down there. It's called the Station Pub, and I walk in, and it's a local little dive pub, and I mean real dive pub, and it's great. All the people are friendly. I talked to the bartender, and she's like, what can I get for you? And I'm like, do you have any amber? And she's like, I'm not sure if we have any amber. And somebody across the bar is like, oh yeah, you do have this new local Pilsner that's from the brewery down the street. It's kind of like an ambery Pilsner. And she's like, do you want that? And I'm like, sure, I'll have that. And then she goes to get me the beer. And then somebody at the bar, this kind of bubbly blonde lady is like, hey, do you want a sandwich? We have a great chicken sandwich tonight. And I think she's the owner of the place or one of the owners. And she's like, I made a great sauce for that chicken sandwich. You should really try it. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I will try that sauce. I will try that chicken sandwich. So I order that. And I'm eating my sandwich, and I'm enjoying myself, and I'm drinking my beer. It's a wonderful time. And then this old man sitting next to me, and he says, hey, are you coming or going? And I'm like, well, I'm hoping that I'm going. I hope the train comes soon. He's like, it's the northbound train is always late. I'm a volunteer over there. It happens all the time. I'm like, oh, really? You're a volunteer over at the Amtrak station? He's like, yep, I sure am. I've been doing it for years. And I remember when he said that when I walked up to the ticket stand at the Amtrak, there was a bunch of pictures of these older folks who were volunteers. They were listed as volunteers. And I was like, oh, these retirees must be just volunteering at the Amtrak station. And he was like, and I asked him about that, and he said, yeah, it's just like that here and up in Olympia too. That's all volunteer run. And I'm like, wow, that is really fascinating. And so I asked him the next logical question. Why? why are you volunteering at this Amtrak station? And at first he demurs about it. He's like, well, it's just something to do. It's 4 hours a week. It keeps me occupied. And then his wife chimes in and she says, no, no, no. He's going there to see the ghost on the Amtrak tracks. And I'm like, what? Now that caught my attention. The ghost on the Amtrak tracks? What's that? I could clearly tell that he doesn't want to talk about this ghost story, but his wife sure does. And she's like, tell him about the ghost. It's actually the ghost of his secretary. That's what she says. It's the ghost of his old secretary. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And he starts to share the story. So I'll try to summarize it for you as best I can. So he had this secretary he had hired years and years ago. And I would have, this guy is probably in his 80s now. So we're probably talking maybe 50 years ago that he had this secretary. And he said he was running an accounting business and she started off really strong, really on top of everything. But over the years, her work just declined and she started making lots of mistakes and he'd give her warnings about those mistakes. And then one day she made a pretty significant mistake that on a client's bill or some documentation that could have gotten them in a lot of trouble. And he pulled her aside and said, you make one more mistake, I've got to let you go. I can't continue. I've given you warnings, but we cannot continue having these mistakes. And she left, and his wife chimes in again and says, yeah, that really set her off. That really set that poor woman off. And I could tell he felt a little guilty about this. And it was kind of awful that his wife was, shaming him in front of me in this nice little bar that we're having drinks at. But that's the story. And so I asked him, well, what happened with the secretary? And he said, the next day she didn't show up for work. I was like, all right, I'm going to fire her. This is it. We have some important work to get done today. She hasn't shown up. So I'm in my mind like, all right, that's it. We're done. We're firing her now. Then I get a call from the sheriff's office, and it turns out she had gotten inebriated the night before and walked out onto the tracks and collapsed there. And at some point, a train ran right over her. And it was not a sight to behold, according to the sheriff. Man, talk about, you could have heard a pin drop in that bar. Like no one was expecting something as horrific as that, right? And so I'm just stunned, and I'm drinking my beer, and then the wife says, now tell them about trying to contact the family. Because when you're in a leadership position, you're working with people, often when a tragedy happens like this, it also becomes incumbent upon you to work with the family. And in this case, work with the family to get the belongings to them and help them out with anything they might need. But in this case, it was really difficult because apparently the woman was very estranged from her family, and it took this old guy and the sheriff about a week or so to even find a contact with her brother. And when he contacted her brother, he said it was tragic. It made so much about who she was click together because he said that she was estranged from the family because she didn't feel she was fully supported by them when she was brutally attacked while living in Los Angeles. And he said the attack was pretty brutal. It left her in the hospital. And he felt like the family tried to support her, but she never felt that they had done enough. And so that's what we know about her past. And the old man and the wife reflected on, how trauma is not tattooed on your body, right? Trauma is expressed through behavior. You can't just look at somebody and see their trauma, but often their behavior and their actions start to give you clues as to the problems that they're going through. And the old man said she had displayed many a clue, that she often had this sweet aroma around her associate that he knew was coming through her pores due to her alcoholism. And the grading of the work that she was doing was also a sign. And, he really didn't know what to do at the time. If he had to do it over again, he said he certainly would. He would have helped her get into Alcoholics Anonymous and maybe tried to get her therapy. But at the time, he just didn't know any better. And so his wife chimed in one last time and said, and that's why he goes to the railroad station. That's why he volunteers there, because he wants to see that ghost. Because that's the legend, that she comes back as a ghost every night. And sometimes when the southbound train is passing through, the one that hit her, you can sometimes hear her scream into the night like a banshee. And so I took all that in and was like, that was more than I thought I was going to get when I walked into this bar 15 minutes ago. So they got up and they said their goodbyes, and I finished my beer and my chicken sandwich, and I went back to the Amtrak station. Of course, the volunteer there said, "Yeah, the train is still late, so you're gonna have to hang out a while longer." I was fine with that. It is what it is, right? So I go back out on the platform, sit down, and watch the sun setting in the distance, and a southbound train comes rolling by. And I do think I hear something as it passes, like this screeching, grinding, squealing, something. But it was probably just a train. It was probably nothing, and it's probably just a local legend that people tell themselves to make them feel or derive some meaning about the tragic experience that happened to them. And I think this is definitely a good lesson in when you're leading people, that when they're not performing as well as they should, that's often an expression of something else that's going on. And then, when you're a supervisor or you're in a leadership position, you can't be everybody's therapist. You have to have boundaries and stuff like that as well. And there's a limit to what you can do, but I think we also need to be empathetic. Sometimes have tough conversations with people you're working with. Try to connect them to the support systems that they need, and just be sensitive to the fact that often these problematic behaviors that surface at work, can be the result of trauma from the past. So that's that Halloween ghost story for this segment of the Sense and Signal podcast. Next, we are going to go and talk about Lyndon B. Johnson and his encounter with a spirit from the other side.